Good morning and welcome to the Daily Aus. It's Wednesday, the 15th of April. I'm Zara Seidler.
I'm Billi FitzSimons.
Yesterday, opposition leader Angus Taylor delivered his first major policy speech since becoming leader of the Liberal Party. In it, Taylor unveiled his party's new immigration plan, which he argued must discriminate based on values.
Past governments blindly repeated mantras about Australia being the world's most successful multicultural society and diversity being our strength. Such doctrines saw us open our borders to people who, far from wanting to join and contribute to Australia, have wanted to take from Australia and even change Australia to suit them.
In today's podcast, we're going to unpack what this immigration policy actually is and why Taylor argues Australia's system needs to change. But first, here is a quick message from our lovely colleague, Rosa.
Hey, my name is Rosa. I'm the multimedia producer here at the Daily Aus, which means I help edit the audio and video content that you're watching right now. Most recently, it means I've helped the team transition from audio podcasts to a full-time video podcast, which you can watch on Apple or YouTube. The Daily Aus is always looking for new ways of doing things, but to continue doing that, we need our audience to grow. One way you can help us is by leaving us a 5-star review on Apple or commenting on episodes on Spotify. It helps our engagement, which helps new audiences find us. And thank you for being a part of the TDA community.
Zara, it's been a while since we've spoken about the coalition. I think particularly in terms of what their actual policies are. I think they've had some internal things that they needed to sort out with who their leader is, etc. But we now have a relatively stable leadership in Angus Taylor being the leader of the Liberal Party. Matt Canavan is the leader of the Nationals. But today we're speaking about the Liberal Party's first policy. Yep. Is that right?
Yeah, or the coalition's first policy.
Right, so it's a joint policy announcement.
Yeah, it is. I mean, as leader of the coalition, this is what Angus Taylor was getting up and announcing. I mean, the party is together for now. That's kind of been on and off for the last couple of months. But Angus Taylor has presented a coalition policy. I guess just to give you a bit of a lay of the land. So we can only rely on polling when we get a sense of how parties are faring, because the next federal election won't be held for another at least 2 years. And so
I'm counting the days.
Voters won't go. We'll be sitting right here telling you all about it. Voters don't go to the ballot box until then, at least on a federal level. And so what we understand about the Liberal Party standing currently is that it is struggling. So we've spoken here before about the rise of One Nation. That is something that is being felt very acutely by the Liberal Party. So the last news poll, that is the poll that's commissioned by The Australian, by News Corp, that had One Nation higher than the coalition in terms of a primary vote. Of course, again, that's just an indication. It's not what's going to necessarily happen, but we are seeing a Liberal Party and indeed a coalition that is trying to find its feet and understand what will resonate with the Australian people.
And so what did they announce yesterday? What is their first policy?
Their first policy is about immigration. So Angus Taylor set out that this was going to be one part of a bigger immigration kind of overhaul that he would implement if he became Prime Minister. So again, just to reiterate, this isn't a policy that's going to be put in front of Parliament and then voted on and become law. The coalition are not in power. They don't have a majority in the lower or the upper house. It would be very difficult for that to happen. And so this is just them saying, if we were to win government in 2028, here's what we would do. And that's what oppositions tend to do.
And so what are they actually proposing?
Okay, a few things. So I'll go through them one by one. I think the thing that would have made the most headlines is that Angus Taylor said that if he was Prime Minister, that under the Liberal government, there would be social media checks on anyone coming in with a visa to this country. So you would have to, if you are applying for a visa to get into Australia, even as a tourist, you would have to provide immigration officials with your social media handles, and that your social media handles would be vetted before you were granted a visa.
That's so interesting because I've heard of that happening in the US.
Yeah.
And there have been a few headlines, I think, since Donald Trump became president for a second time, of people trying to get into the US being rejected because of their social media profiles.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting. So this is already, as we said, being done in the US. And I was thinking about this when I heard Angus Taylor announce it, because one of the things that the Liberal Party review found after the last election was that comparisons between Peter Dutton and Donald Trump really hurt Peter Dutton. But now Angus Taylor has almost entirely adopted the same protocols and the same process as the United States has, which is just an interesting observation.
That's so interesting. And I think, but now we have the context of the rise of One Nation and Pauline Hanson.
Yeah.
And we know that one of the policies that Pauline Hanson really peddles is on immigration.
Yeah, I think that there's no hiding the fact that this is an attempt to get voters who the Liberal Party and the coalition might be losing to One Nation, because this is quite a strong stance on immigration that, even the Susan Lee Liberal Party didn't adopt. And that, again, the party moves from left to right and centre, wherever it might go. But that was the first announcement by Angus Taylor. Another one was essentially that, so Australia has a non-discriminatory immigration system. And what that means is that we don't discriminate based on nationality, race, gender, or faith when we are assessing who can come into this country.
It would be illegal to do that, right?
Well, what Angus Taylor said is that he thinks that our country's immigration system must discriminate based on Australian values. So he's saying that compliance with Australian values has to be a compulsory visa condition for all temporary and permanent visa holders. So if you don't comply with Australian values, and it's interesting, there is it's a document of Australian values that people entering on these visas need to sign. And he was saying that that's just been a checkbox thing and that people haven't actually been upholding those values. And so he needs it to be a legal requirement, and that if you do not uphold Australian values, that you should be kicked out of this country or not allowed in the first place.
This could be a dumb question, and I feel like as an Australian I should know this, but what are the Australian values that he's talking about?
It's not a dumb question. I mean, you didn't come here on a visa, so you wouldn't have had to ever sign this or rather read it. So I have it up in front of me. It's the Australian Values Statement. It says, I understand that Australian society values respect for the freedom and dignity of the individual, freedom of religion, freedom of speech and freedom of association, commitment to the rule of law, parliamentary democracy, equality of opportunity for all people, a fair go, and that the English language is the national language and an important unifying element of Australian society. So some ideological things there, but also the fact that English is our national language. And so if you're coming in on a temporary or provisional visa, you need to sign this. And he's saying that should be a legal requirement. And in terms of, I guess, justifying why Angus Taylor said this, I'm going to read a quote directly that he said. He said, our nation has paid the price for believing that anyone from anywhere will embrace our way of life. Not everyone wanting to migrate to Australia has noble intent. Not everyone wanting to migrate to Australia will be a net benefit to Australia. Indeed, many will be a net drain. He did clarify that he was talking about the minority of people, not the majority. He stressed that the majority of those who were coming in with good intent. But this and the Liberal Party's visa crackdown is on what he says are those bad faith actors who are, what he said, importing ideologies from other places to Australia.
And is this for all visas, including people who are here on holiday?
So this isn't for tourists. This is for if you're trying to settle for a prolonged period of time.
Gotcha.
The social media one, though, that is for tourists. So if you are visiting Australia to see family for 2 weeks, you would have to hand over your social media handles, but you wouldn't have to sign this document because you're not planning to stay here.
Hey guys, this is my friend Rosa. Say hi, Rosa.
Hi, Rosa.
She's cooking up the deep dive video that you're watching right now. Rosa, what do you want them to do?
Subscribe.
You heard the woman. Now back to the video.
Zara, before we get to, I guess, the coalition's current ideological stance and how it's shifted over the years, was there anything else in this policy announcement yesterday that we should talk about?
Yeah, there were two other things that I think we should talk about. One was Angus Taylor announced a pledge to commit new funding for law enforcement agencies to track down, arrest and deport non-citizens whose visas have been cancelled or have run out. So he's talking there about funding an agency to help with deportations. And he said to fast track deportations of people who have overstayed visas or have run out of legal options to stay in the country.
Like ICE in the US?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think, and he certainly didn't give a straight equivalence there, but he said that it was to fund law enforcement agencies and to give them more powers to do these sorts of things. I mean, there are already scenarios where if you overstay a visa and then you appeal that and you run out of appeals, that you can't stay in the country.
I was going to say, it's not like...
That's not a new thing, but he was just talking about fast tracking that and
Right.
I guess giving more power for that to happen more frequently or at a quicker pace. And then the last part was that Angus Taylor singled out a cohort who he believed needed to be reassessed, or their visa status needed to be reassessed or would be reassessed if he was in power.
An entire cohort?
It was Palestinians who had entered Australia since October 7. So he said, and I'm directly quoting here, he claimed this cohort present a clear risk to our country. And he said they come to our country from a society run by a barbaric Islamist terrorist organization, an organization that has sought to indoctrinate and radicalize their entire population. And he claimed that that was the basis on which this entire cohort, the group of Palestinians who had come to Australia on visas, and those visas had been authorised by the Australian government, he believed that that needed to be reassessed and that if he was in government, that would happen.
And he didn't single out any other group, ethnicity,
No.
country?
No, it was a speech that he delivered at a liberal think tank, and to my knowledge, that was the group that he singled out.
And I flagged before that I think we should talk about whether or not this is a shift for the coalition because like you said, at the last election, they were criticised for, I guess, seemingly drawing on policies that seemed a bit Trump-like.
Yeah.
And then there was the report saying that that approach was part of the reason that the coalition lost so significantly at the last election.
I think that it's interesting when you think about the context because at the beginning it really helped Peter Dutton when he was associated with Donald Trump. And it was at the time when those tariffs first started to hit and the economy started to falter that started to hurt him. And so I think it's interesting to think about the global context and Donald Trump's standing globally when you think about if it's kind of net positive or net negative, that's a tongue twister, to be associated with the US president right now. But this is certainly, at least ideologically, a shift to the right for the Liberal Party from, as I said, where it was with Susan Lee. But again, this isn't something that's becoming policy tomorrow. It's a proposal. And if it were, if the coalition were to win power at the next election, it would need to go through Parliament and there would be checks and balances along the way through that parliamentary system. So certainly not something that's round the corner, but an interesting indication of the thinking of the current coalition. And as you've said, really clearly identifying that there is a risk of losing more voters to One Nation.
And it tells us exactly what their priorities are.
Yeah, it's the first major policy that they've announced and it's immigration.
Has the government, so the Labor Party, have they responded to this policy announcement?
Well, Labor's criticised the proposal. I do have some quotes here from Tony Burke, whose portfolio covers immigration currently as part of his role in the government. He said, and I quote, "Not one line in the speech would deliver an extra job, create an extra house, or keep anyone safer. The government's been bringing the numbers down and bringing the standards up. Mr. Taylor's diatribe has nothing to do with the national interest and is entirely about sending a vibe to One Nation." So
I haven't heard the word diatribe in a while.
I know. It's a good word. So that is Labor's criticism. Then we have the Greens, who criticised Angus Taylor's proposal as bringing back the White Australia policy. And they were especially critical about the way in which Angus Taylor's speech singled out that cohort of Palestinians who had arrived in Australia. That was a big focus of David Shoebridge's criticism that he posted on social media.
Well, a very interesting one, and one that we'll be keeping our eye on for at least 2 years until the next
I know, it's going to be a long time. There is a long run up there. Yeah.
Okay, before we go,
Yeah.
it's time for tidbit.
Okay.
Is this the first podcast I've done with you?
Where I get to do the tidbit?
Oh no, I did since
We
I
did it
introduced.
yesterday.
Oh, sorry, I have a bad memory.
Well, 24 whole hours.
I've just been so excited by the tidbit.
I know I have seen you responding to everyone on Spotify with your very clear excitement. Now, the tidbit that we had yesterday was about golf. So I've decided that I am
In the newsletter, not
in the newsletter.
podcast.
Yes, I'm going to not do that one because
Okay.
love golf, but just not for me.
Perfect.
So I wanted to talk to you about Alex Earle and Alex
Oh my God,
Cooper.
yes.
And I'm hoping that by the time this drops in your feeds, something major hasn't happened and that we haven't messed this all up.
Okay, can I tell you something that I've long thought about myself, which perhaps means that I'm bad at my job, but I hope not.
Yeah.
I think that I'm very gullible because everyone in the office has said that this is a PR stunt. And I'm like, guys, no, this looks so real. I think Alex Cooper is genuinely like, tell us your beef.
Okay, for any listeners who don't understand that, let's just take it back one step. So Alex Cooper, call her daddy. She is a world famous podcaster. She's got one of the biggest podcasts in the world. She used to, so she has a podcast network, and on that network was Alex Earle. Not to be confused with Alex Cooper. Don't know why they have to both have the same name. And Alex Earle had a podcast on her network, and then suddenly it went off air. There was some beef. No one ever really spoke about it. There were discussions about there being NDAs as to why Alex Earle couldn't discuss what had happened. And then earlier this week, we get a video from Alex Cooper saying, you know what? I've seen your passive aggressiveness. Just come out and say what's going on.
I know what happened. And so do you. So talk. Unless the fake narrative that you're creating happens to be way more interesting than the truth.
And Alex Earle comments saying,
I'm on it.
I'm on it, which is so PR stunt. And
I don't think it is a PR stunt.
I mean, this might not age well if it is either way, because one of us are going to be very wrong. But I feel like, here is my prediction, we are going to see an episode with Alex Earle this week.
Oh, okay.
And I just don't know if I love the approach of this as PR.
I think that's because you've made up the approach. It's not a PR stunt.
Me and the rest of the internet. All right, what's your prediction? That it's just real.
I think that it's real and that Alex Earle will do some sort of a video explaining what happened. Anyway, we'll see who's right.
Well, there is only one way to find out who's right, and that is to stay tuned. Thank you for joining us on this episode of The Daily Aus. We'll be back later today with the headlines, but until then, have a great day.